Alright, so next up we're going to go into ballistics. Now, the clan ballistics here, you have UACs, RACs, LBX, Gauss rifles, the railgun, which is just a very large Gauss rifle, and then the hyper assault Gauss rifles and then the machine guns. So, in general, the UACs here, they just fire pretty much a machine gun type of deal, except for they're not super fast just yet. I'll show you right here with the UAC-20. It has a cooldown of 1 second, and each second it deals 15 damage. That's a considerable amount of damage to be putting out. So it is a very powerful weapon to use. Of course, it only comes with 27 rounds per ton of ammo, so you need to be conscious about using up that ammo. Let's see, I think I got that set up. See, on occasion I mess up on the animations here. Alright. Let's just go over to the UAC, well actually the RAC. Let's go to the RAC-2. No, the RAC-20, I'll go to that one since we're on the UAC-20. RAC-20 has 4 times the rate of fire, but has 3 times less damage. This puts it at just about a little bit more DPS on average, but, you know, less damage per shot. It makes it pretty good for anti-infantry work, or just, you know, if you don't want all your shots in one basket kind of deal. But, here we go. Let's see how that looks. As you can see, it fires pretty rapidly. Those are some pretty big projectiles, too. Now, one thing you'll notice is that the RICs have slight amounts of spread that the UACs don't. It usually doesn't matter much, but I'm just going to make note of it just so people know. Alright, now if we're actually looking for a gun that has a lot of spread on it, we're going to get the LBX. LBX is pretty much a shotgun in DakTek if you're using certain types of ammo. Now, LBX actually has the ability to swap rounds. It has pellets, slugs, and anti-air. Now, the pellets just fire, you know, this shotgun round, but what they do is they deal 50% more damage than whatever the number is. So this is an LBX-20, you'll be dealing 30 damage. Now, the velocity is also pretty quick on these pellets, so you'll be generally doing quite a bit of damage using the pellet rounds. But at long range, you'll be likely to miss quite a few shots. Now, this is why I have the slug rounds here. Slug rounds allow you to just do the normal 20 damage, but it works at any range. Now, the difference between a normal autocannon and an LBX autocannon, though, is that the LBX autocannon still fires slightly slower than the normal autocannon. This means that even using slugs, it won't be as good. And then lastly, for the anti-air weaponry. The anti-air round is actually a proximity round that you fire into the air near a target, and if it gets close enough, it will then explode and then launch pellets towards the enemy from that position. It's pretty effective, but it still deals just the normal 20 damage instead of the you know, 30 damage that you get from pellets. So as we see, I'm going to fire the pellet rounds here now. I don't know if I can see it from there. As you can see, it spreads out considerably. Alright, so now let's swap over to slug rounds here. Alright, as you can see, it'll fire a single shell. And that shell has pretty considerable drop, falling about right there. Now if we swap to anti-air, it'll actually go out quite further, right above it. Now if there's a target in the area, I'll draw out this wheel over there. You can see it goes explodes towards it like that. Alright, so next up we have the Gauss rifle here. The Gauss rifle basically just fires a single projectile at very high speeds at an enemy target. And same thing with the railgun, except for the railgun fires a much bigger target, but it's so powerful that it actually generates recoil on yourself when you fire. I'll actually, let's see, I actually show off firing the Gauss rifle here so we can see what one of those looks like. It's quite a simple gun, really. It'll just fire for very little heat, so it is a good weapon to use if you're, you know, boating lasers or something like that. As you can see, it just fires that one shot, very high velocity, directly forward. There actually is drop on the shell, though, but you won't notice it too much due to the high speeds. Alright, next up I'm going to test out one of the HAGs, which is a Hyper Assault Gauss Rifle. It works quite similar to a normal Gauss Rifle, except for it has much higher rates of fire, fires in bursts, and actually generates considerable amounts of heat. As you can see. Alright. And lastly we have machine guns, which are pretty basic, you know. They'll just fire a normal shell out and goes directly forward like that. I'm going to assume you don't need a demonstration on this one. Okay, so let's check out the inner sphere ballistics. Now, the ballistics that the inner sphere has that the clans don't would be the normal autocannons, which work quite similar to the LBX autocannons that we've went over before, except for their normal round is a standard slug. Their secondary round is a flak round, which rather than going near the target and firing pellets at it, it just goes near the target and actually explodes in a normal blast radius. This is pretty useful for getting around reactive armors, because reactive armor does not actually protect you extra against explosive damage, only normal ballistic damage. So it is a quite good way to get around enemy aircraft that happens to be running reactive. And lastly, there's Inferno rounds. Inferno rounds fire for half the normal damage, but they cause heat damage to the enemy, and also reduce their cooling by quite a large amount. I think it reduces it down to 20% for the next 3 seconds. It's very good for limiting your enemy's DPS while still being able to output some of your own. I'll just show it off right here. Autocannon. Alright, they also have armored versions of these, just so if you want to make sure it doesn't get shot off ever, then you can do that. Now the inner sphere UACs and RICs are just heavier, and they have, you know, less heat per second. Well, less heat per shot too. And their LBX will fire faster while also being colder running. That's the main difference there. Now the inner sphere has multiple types of Gauss rifles, including the normal Gauss rifle, heavy, light, and then the mag shot, which is an extremely small machine gun type of deal, except for it's not a machine gun, actually just is the size of one, but it fires every 2 seconds, so it's not that fast. And they even have the silver bullet Gauss, which is essentially a Gauss shotgun. It's quite powerful actually, but somewhere between the Gauss and the heavy Gauss, as long as you can handle the spread of it. And lastly, the inner sphere has cannons. These cannons actually fire high explosive shells, and they're heavily damaging. Here's the long tom cannon. I'm going to fire one of these shots just so you can see it. The long tom fires a low velocity shell, and the it'll have pretty high arcs, honestly. It's very hard to aim it correctly, but if you do hit somebody with it, it'll do massive amounts of damage. Now, the sniper cannon is more of a direct fire gun. It has more damage in the actual shell hitting than the explosive. And the thumper is basically the same thing as the long tom, but much lighter. It's half the weight. Now let's see if this fires. As you can see, it's quite a big explosion from all the way over there.